click that next button. Don't even think about clicking on a different podcast, because That is Effin' Weird is here to bring you a wealth of knowledge today.
Welcome back to That is Effin' Weird, and we have another UFO/alien topic for the month of January. I am Stevenson Longbotom, but I'm not alone today. I have a guest on who has wrote his first book, working on a second one. He's the author of Strange Lights, which goes over personal accounts of UFOs, NDEs, and other mysteries. He's been a hobbyist for the last 3 years. So, Edson, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wanted to come onto the show?
Sure. So I got interested in the topics around UFOs and near-death experiences and some of these other unexplained topics. A few years ago, things had kind of chipped away at my belief system a little bit. And I got interested in long story short, I wrote a long story. I wrote a book called Strange Light. It is a collection of firsthand accounts. So I interviewed people who had these extraordinary experiences, and then I just sort of acted as storyteller on their behalf. So it's a collection of all different, not just UFOs and aliens, but those are in there. Anything from precognition to paranormal to, all the different aspects of the sort of unexplained.
Interesting. So I was just under the assumption that it was just strictly about like UFOs and aliens, but the near-death experiences, I'm sure when you were interviewing people that it was maybe a little bit emotional, maybe it kind of like, was it tough? Was it audio, or was it just something that people sent you in like letters and maybe texts, things like that?
Almost everything was done through video chat, so Zoom or something similar. I did do a couple in person, and I did do one strictly via email, or two actually via text, because in one case, the person was in Japan.
Oh, wow.
They didn't speak English. I didn't speak Japanese. So we just used, sort of translation capabilities to have our conversation. And then there was another person who had she was in the UK, and she had a paranormal experience as a child that triggered a severe stutter. And she still has that stutter. And so she wanted to, rather than try and do a voice interview, we talked back and forth with, text messages. So, but most of them were Zoom.
That is so interesting that something paranormal happened. How old was she? How long had it been going on for?
She was a kid when this happened. I don't know exactly the age, but I want to say like 7 or 8.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit younger. They had moved into a house, an old Victorian house in the UK, and seemed to have some paranormal activity. And there was an old man that sort of appeared. She thought it was a actual person, not a paranormal ghost or something. It was a man covered in blood. Completely scared the heck out of her. And then there was some connected things within the family that they had all seen in the house, and it kind of went on as long as they lived there. But after that initial experience, she developed a stutter, and despite years of speech therapy and things like that, it never really went away.
How old is she now?
I don't know. She's well into adulthood, but I don't know that I asked her age.
We're probably talking 20, 30 plus years that she's had this.
Right.
That is crazy. Yeah. All right, so for our listeners out there, that's what you have to look forward to as far as reading this book, Strange Lights from Edson. Take a look at that. We will provide the link to that book, if you don't mind, Edson, so our listeners can take a look at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Cool. So let me ask you this. What first sparked your interest into, I guess, UFOs and extraterrestrial life? We will talk about the near-death experiences a little bit too later, but I kind of want to hit those UFOs first.
Yeah, honestly, that was the thing that first drew me into these topics, was the UFO topic. And I think it started with the New York Times article, the 2017 article, where basically the Pentagon kind of acknowledged that there were some unexplained things going on.
Yeah.
And a couple of leaked videos. And then the David Grush testimony more recently. Those sort of switched me from being more of a skeptic to like, well, maybe I should pay more attention to this topic. And then I think there was I want to say a Netflix series about, I think it was centered around death, but there was one episode in particular that really sucked me in, and it had to do with children who, when they're very young, have memories of a past life, and in some cases, very specific details that then they would go out and try and verify the life that they had lived before this one. That really kind of made me stop and say, wait a minute, what is going on here? Just one thing that led to another, and here I am.
So it's funny that you talk about kids that have had a past life. I'm a diehard Unsolved Mysteries fan, like from back in the 90s. Like my dad watched that stuff growing up, and like I was just sitting there watching it. So I think that's where like my love for it kind of sparked. But 2 or 3 years ago, I remember rewatching the whole series, and there is a specific episode, because same thing with you. It's insane, where it's like the reincarnation thing, and these kids can pick out, or they remember very specific things about who they say they were prior. The one that stands out to me, and I always has, was this little boy who had never seen his grandpa. His grandpa had passed away years before he was born, and the little boy is getting changed by his dad, and the little boy is like, I used to do this to you. And the dad like kind of took him by surprise. And then they're sitting around looking at old pictures, and he points to his grandpa who he had never seen before. And he's like, that's me. That's who I am. And so it's really crazy that kids' imaginations, I know, can go kind of wild and everything. But something just like another layer to add onto that is sometimes there are birthmarks where these kids say, like, I was hurt or I was murdered, and they have a birthmark where they say they got hurt. Now, again, kids' imaginations can go kind of wild, but it is still very interesting that they say these things. So I kind of remember what you're saying.
Yeah, there was one that stuck with me where it was a kid who basically remembered being a pilot in World War II and
oh wow,
serving on a specific ship that he named, and dying when his plane crashed into the ocean. And he would name all these details about who he was, what ship he was on, where it happened, and they were able to go back and find a person who matched all of these things, and that just blew my mind. That I don't know how to explain it.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like sometimes these kids are too young to like know what to look for or search. Now I get it, like maybe they stumbled across maybe an article or saw something, but to remember and say very specific things is very odd to me.
Yeah, for sure.
So kind of going back to the UFO stuff, you said his name is David.
Oh, David Grush.
Yeah, what specifically, I guess, did he say, or like, I guess, kind of sparked your interest, or what was it about the things that he was saying that kind of made you scratch your head?
So he was testifying before Congress, and he had been a very high-level intelligence official to the point where he was giving briefings to the president. He worked in all different types of intelligence fields, and he basically testified before Congress and said, this is all non-human intelligence is real, and they're here. We have retrieved craft, and we've retrieved the pilots of those craft in some cases. And when pressed for details, he basically said, I can only get into more details in a secure briefing room. I can't talk about it in public. And you got to be careful when you're talking about intelligence officials saying things, because sometimes they have their own agendas, or they're trying to shape a narrative and things like that. But it was under oath and in front of Congress, and it made me go, yeah, there's more to this than just a bunch of crazy guys out in the woods seeing lights after drinking too much moonshine or something.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this, because this is almost like kind of like a personal question, maybe not like super personal or anything like that. How do you decipher what you believe is like credible, and then just kind of like, this is probably fake? Because again, like it's one of these things where like, okay, when people do go before Congress, and this is kind of what sparked my interest too, like having this conversation, especially like for like whistleblowers. Yes, they are under oath. What is the implication then if they are lying? Is it the aspect that they are before Congress and they are like, yep, everything I'm saying is true, and based on their position in the military, does all of those things add those layers of credibility?
I'm not a military or intelligence guy, but as I understand it, there are cases where part of their job is to lie to the public, So there's always that possibility that this is some kind of intelligence operation that is trying to direct public opinion towards something. It's not every day that you go under oath and say these things in front of Congress. Do I believe every word of it? I don't know, maybe. But it's another little piece of data that makes me go, this is interesting. I want to look into this some more. It does get a little tricky when you talk about UFOs and aliens and things online, because It's very fractured and very contentious, and in every post, every conversation kind of devolves into the same kind of arguments, whether it's you're looking at a photo that somebody allegedly took, or a conversation that somebody overheard, or firsthand accounts or things like that. They all can get into this, debunking versus the true believers, and that kind of became exhausting to me after a little while. So as far as your question of how do you discern what's credible and what's not, I just try to keep an open mind and not collapse down on this is definitely true or this is definitely a lie, especially when I'm talking to like the people that I interviewed for the book.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between someone telling a story around the campfire about, an urban legend or even maybe something that they had happen to them versus someone who is telling you their account and how it changed their entire life, and they're tearing up as they're telling you, and they have this attitude of, I don't care if you believe me or not, this is what I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
That has a whole different feel to it. And there may be elements of things that, stories that I put in my book that are not real. I decided to kind of set that aside and say, I'm going to take these people at their word, and I'm going to listen to their story. If we do this a number of times, maybe we can figure out a bigger picture of what may be going on.
The fact that AI has just become so evolved in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Pictures, videos, things like that. You have like Michael Jackson and Kobe Bryant trying to sell Zins. It's insane how people can manipulate or create things like that look so real. So again, like I feel like the UFO community, the mystery, the cryptids, paranormal, ghosts, anything like that where it's so hard to prove. This whole wave of AI, it is so hard, and it's just washed the community where it's like, okay, now it's going to be even more challenging, and people are going to really have their walls up if something is real or not. So it does suck that we're going through that. I feel like we can kind of rely more heavily on past pictures, videos, things like that. I feel like if there's something like 2010 and from that point on going past, like you can kind of add some credibility to it, but anything like 2020 and moving forward, it's just, you really have to be careful.
Yeah, and it's the other problem we have besides that, which is a big problem, is that things are so divided on all different topics right now that if the president, and whether it's this president or any other president, or to step in front of a mic and say, yes, this is real, aliens are here, here's my friend, and walk him out to the podium, there's still going to be a faction of people that are going to say, that's not real, that's AI, that's, a psyop or something. So even if you have proof in front of you on TV or online, you're going to trust it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe that's what drew me to the firsthand accounts, was that it removes some of those filter layers. It doesn't necessarily mean that witness accounts are more credible than photos or anything, but it's information, it's testimony, it's evidence on some level. I think it's interesting.
It really is. And a question that I want to ask you, because we're kind of on this subject of like, is it real or is it not? Have you heard of the Project Bluebeam?
Yeah, I have heard of that. Yeah.
For our audience members who may not have heard of it, it's the government or world governments, I'm not sure which one. There will be a fake alien invasion, and then therefore all the world powers have to come together to defeat this. Long story short, it's a fake one. It's not real, but it's a way to create that one world power. So for that, do you feel like this is like the AI is kind of like the birthplace of like, okay, this is how the Project Bluebeam will work?
That's a tough one. I have no idea. That, I mean, it's at this stage, because of technology and everything, a lot of things are plausible. Is that how it's going to go, or is that something in the works? I don't know. I don't even know what to make of it.
Yeah, I think about these things, just sitting, just relax, and like one of these thoughts will come across my head where it's like, oh, that that might be what's going on. Because again, like AI moves so fast, and you see all these posts about like how certain events line up perfectly, and it's like, oh, okay, soon this is going to happen, and it does. So it makes you scratch your head and wonder sometimes. But on the same topic of like information and everything, as far as your book goes, did you encounter any sort of information or anybody that you ultimately decided not to include into your book?
Yeah, so the more common situation was somebody deciding to sort of withdraw from the project for one reason or another. Like, I interviewed a couple of people who told me their stories and they were really compelling, and then I wrote them up and I sent them the draft and they were like, yeah, this is pretty good, let's make these adjustments. And we went through the process, and then further down the line they said, you know what, I decided I'm not comfortable with this
Really?
being shared with the world just now. Yeah. And I was perfectly fine with that. Like, I'm not gonna, part of the sort of ethical framework that I've put around this for myself is I don't want to be exploiting somebody's story. I want them to be happy with it, and I want them to feel that it's accurate to their experience. I did in some cases anonymize things at their request, depending on what kind of job they have or whatever. They may not want their details out there, but there were 2 or 3 people that said, no, I'm not ready for this. And then there were a couple that I just left out because they either didn't fit with what I was trying to do, or there was somebody who I was like, I don't know about this one, man. That sounds pretty not believable.
And again, I feel like even the posts that I had put out for this interview and this talk and everything, I probably had 3 to 4 people reach out to me about being abducted by aliens or like having like personal encounters, which would make for a great show. I would have loved to talk with them, but some of them decided not to respond after I was like, hey, okay, yeah, when can you talk? They just sent that message and then they were done. And then some of the stories were just like, oh, I don't know if, like, I'm not saying I don't believe you, but that is really outlandish. And this was like, things like this are like, I always think back to movies when like little kids are telling like their parents like, oh, hey, this is going on. And the parents are like, yeah, okay. And they brush them off. It really is one of those things where it's like, okay, well, what if what they are saying is true?
Right.
And that's why I like to talk to people and like have these conversations is, I'm not going to judge anyone. If you think you saw something or you heard something or you want to get something off your chest, then awesome. Like I'll sit and listen to it. And then if it is real, it's sweet. If not, then all right, you told a good story.
And that's kind of the premise of what I was doing was, what if we just listen to these stories and suspend that disbelief the way you would for a blockbuster movie or a romance novel or whatever you're into. Let's just set aside the proof question, quote unquote, and just hear the story and go, what if this is real? What if this person's experience is accurate as they're telling it? What does that mean?
And two, isn't that what all of this is anyway? It's all theory and it's all what ifs. So like, yeah, some things may land a little bit more, but at the end of the day, if we really are alone in this universe, then all of it is not real and all of it is, I guess, quote unquote fake. So we did an episode way back when it was about the universe, or I think it was like infinity, something like that. It was a very challenging episode because once you start looking at the grand scheme of like how small we really are as a species and as Earth, it hurts your head. I don't know if you like are into like the whole science world and everything, but the largest black hole, we are just like a tiny grain of sand in like out of all the beaches in the world compared to this massive black hole. I think it's called Stevenson, or no, it's not Stevenson. What is it? It's gonna bug me. I gotta look it up. Have you heard of that though?
I haven't heard of that specifically, but the concept, yeah, the idea that in the near infinity of the universe that it's just us is sort of implausible and also sort of, I don't know if terrifying is the right word, but like it almost seems egocentric to say Earth is the only planet in all the billions or trillions out there that has life on it. Maybe that is true. I kind of doubt it though. Now, whether somebody's flying here from Zeta Reticuli to visit us is a whole other question, because we have this whole light speed issue and everything. But yeah, what's interesting to me is that there are other explanations being floated besides they flew here in metal spaceships from a planet on the far side of the galaxy or something. There's the interdimensional hypothesis and the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis, and some of these other people that are sort of thinking outside the box and going, what if we've made too many assumptions? Maybe we should back up and see if we can come up with other possible explanations for whatever this might be.
Yeah. I'm looking online right now, and I'm not getting exactly what I'm thinking of, but their largest black hole is 36 billion times bigger than the sun.
And the sun's already however many thousand times bigger than the Earth.
Yeah. And again, it's when you think about things, like, it starts hurting your head. And I can't remember how we got onto this specific topic, but
humans are really bad at going from million to billion to trillion to quadrillion. Like once you get alien on the end, it's all just huge numbers and get lost easily.
But getting back on topic, was there any specific UFO case or something in the past, I guess, that kind of deserves more attention or kind of drew you to writing this book, your interest or anything?
Depending on what circles you're in, the Chris Bledsoe story has gotten either too much attention or not enough attention.
I don't think I'm familiar with this one. Can you please explain?
Yeah, so this man down near Fayetteville, North Carolina, named Chris Bledsoe, and maybe 20 years ago or something, he had this crazy experience or series of experiences where he saw this huge orb and lost a bunch of time, and then he wrote a whole book about it. It's called UFO of God.
Okay.
And there's a couple aspects that make it interesting. One is that it drew the attention of the military and other three-letter agencies. They all showed up at his house at various points to talk to him and ask him questions, and are still in touch with him. He's in contact with high-level people at NASA. So that's interesting that his crazy story drew that kind of attention. But the other thing that's interesting is that he can go outside at night and look up at the sky and say there's going to be some orbs coming from this direction, and then they'll show up. And in fact, I've even been to a couple of public skywatching events with him.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a little while sometimes. You got to make sure there's not too much cloud cover. But I mean, there was one night when we saw all kinds of orbs in the sky just moving around. And yes, some of them you have to say that is behaving like a satellite. Some of them, okay, that has blinking lights, that's a plane. But some of them are moving in ways that don't fit either of those patterns. It's really an interesting phenomenon.
That is crazy. I was totally unaware of this. I did not know that this was going on.
Yeah, his story is really remarkable in a lot of ways. But yeah, he can tell you almost any night of his life. He can go outside, and wherever he is, he's done this for members of Congress in Washington, D.C., and these lights will show up. So that's really fascinating and really weird.
Is this something where he's like channeling the orbs to come, or is it something where like he's in communication and like another like extraterrestrial is telling him when and where they're going to be?
That's a good question. And the way he frames it is his background as a younger man was sort of in a Christian upbringing, and he kind of got ostracized by that community because they felt like he was, I don't know, talking to demons or something. He broke away from that beliefs, but his language is still coded in that way where he kind of says he them or reaches out to the heavens or prays to them or whatever, and they show up, and he can kind of tell when they're coming a little bit ahead of time. I think he's been on a couple of TV episodes even where they sort of tried to document this, and they put some brain scan things on his head while he was doing it, and they said it looked like very advanced meditators, like monks and things, would show the same kind of brain waves when they're in deep meditation.
That's great. So when he does these things, because you said you'd been to one, is it with like there hundreds of people there, or is it like a very small group he'll do this for? Do you have to pay money, or do you just show up to his house? Like, how does that work?
So you don't have to pay money. Sometimes they'll go to conferences or something, and they'll go out at night if he's feeling up to it. But the public ones, the ones that I've been to, he lives near a city in North Carolina called Wilmington, down at the coast. And they have, twice a year, they have these festivals. In the spring, it's like the Azalea Fest, and it's a citywide, street festival. And he sets up a little table where he signs copies of his books and talks to people. And then I think in the fall, it's like a river fest, same kind of thing. Craft vendors and food trucks and all that stuff. But then at night, after the festival is done for the night, they'll let people know, come down to the beach, 8 o'clock or whatever time it gets dark, and we'll hang out there for a few hours. And yeah, sometimes there'll be a couple hundred people there, and you got people looking in every direction and pointing out at different points in the sky. And you do have to be careful. Like, people will have their phones out. They have apps that will track satellites and things like that, or flight trackers, and people with specialized cameras for night vision and things to try and be able to get a better look at whatever these things are. And not everything in the sky is unusual, even if it's moving.
100%.
But yeah, sometimes you get interesting colors, or sometimes he will say, can you get a little brighter, and the thing will get brighter. Or I experienced this once with a group of people that were sort of, he wasn't there, but they were people that were sort of in those circles, and we did a sky watch, and somebody sort of jokingly said, can you make a triangle? And then 3 lights come passing across the sky in sort of a tall, narrow triangle shape in unison, and it's just like, come on, man, what is happening right now? So I don't know what exactly the mechanism is there, or what is going on with that phenomenon, but it is pretty interesting.
Okay, two things with this. What's the guy's name?
Chris Bledsoe.
How do you spell his last name?
Bledsoe. And you'll find a number of interviews on various podcasts where he's told his whole story from start to finish. He does post on like Instagram and other places some of the videos of these orb sightings. They have the same problems that a lot of the UFO topic does, where the videos, it's hard to read whether this is good evidence or not when you're watching these grainy or low light videos. But there are some pretty interesting ones.
I'm kind of disappointed. He doesn't look like how I thought he would imagine. When you said like North Carolina and just like this guy just, hanging out on his property, I imagined like some guy with like this really like very old, long white beard, like with a greyhound dog just kind of sitting, or like a dog just sitting next to him, just very backwoods. Does not fit the picture of what I thought he would look like. Looks like just like any guy that you'd see on the street.
Yeah.
And then the second thing was, as far as these objects in the sky, this is my theory behind like orbs and everything like that. I don't think orbs specifically are extraterrestrial. I feel like they are like some sort of drone of an extraterrestrial. It's not like an actual UFO craft with aliens inside of it, but like these small little orb things that are zipping around. I feel like those are extraterrestrial drones. What are your thoughts on that?
It could be. It could be. There's a weird thing that happens when you dive into this topic, where there's this blurring of the lines between physical and not physical aspects of this, in the sense that sometimes you'll have 2 people that witness the same event and they describe it differently. And on the surface, you think, oh, well, that ruins the credibility. But it comes up a lot where one person saw a triangle-shaped craft and another person saw a boomerang-shaped craft, and another person saw nothing at all, even though they were all looking at the same part of the sky. And you start to go, okay, what is there somehow, or like there was an example that I experienced where we all saw the same thing, but when we talked about it the next day, the color of the lights was different. We caught it on camera, but it was a night vision camera, and so you don't get color with that. And I saw it as red, and somebody else saw it as sort of greenish yellow, and another person saw it as teal. How does that work? I don't know.
And like that's the thing too. Like, and again, we're talking about credibility, and we're talking about like just people's encounter of things, especially like, okay, like the whole going back to the whole whistleblower thing. These people are recounting things, or they're telling what's supposed to be true. And it's not a hit on them. It's just human nature that sometimes we think we saw something a certain way, And then when we try to recount it, it's a little bit more difficult. Unless you have like a photographic memory, I think you're going to leave things out, not on purpose.
Sometimes you can even inadvertently create false memories for yourself, right? Like
Correct.
you tell a story or you hear a story and you tell it again, and over time it drifts a little bit, or maybe, you hear somebody else's story and incorporated it as your own memory. It does happen for sure.
Yeah. Kind of getting into like a different aspect of this when we're talking about people's experiences and everything. I know you said you had talked to people from the UK, Japan. Do you see any similarities, or if we're talking about UFOs, do we see any similarities or paranormal stuff between different countries and cultures? Are there things that are like completely different to, okay, they're exactly the same?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It seems like there's more commonality than there is differences. Sometimes the differences are like in terms of the words that we use to describe something. So I'll give you an example. There was a person I interviewed for the book who grew up in India, and he had, as a child at his grandmother's house, he had what I would call a paranormal experience. Like a ghost that had walked down the hallway with jingling bracelets or anklets on, the sound as this spirit or whatever walked down the hallway of his grandmother's house. When he told his grandmother about it, the way she described it was, oh, that's just a local deity coming to check on the house. So she says local deity, we say ghost or spirit or something. The commonalities, sometimes there's a cultural lens put on things, but like if you look at NDE research, near-death experience research, there's so many common elements of a white light and being surrounded by loved ones, and sometimes there's a life review where you get to see things that played out in your life and different decision points and how they affected other people, and then this choice of coming back or not. So it is really interesting to see the commonalities and the differences, but it does feel like there's much more similarities across cultures, even across time frames.
And like and not to get into a religious talk or anything like that, but I feel like sometimes when we're talking about the paranormal, or the people are trying to put like an explanation to stuff, even religions have like their versions of angels and demons and good versus evil.
Right.
I feel like even if we have, different cultures, religions, we're living in different spots, we are going to see some similarities, and there are going to be some differences just because that's the way things are.
Right.
So, as far as going back to the whole UFO talk, real quick, we're switching gears and we're talking about like the government. Historically, why do you think the government has been so secretive of all of the UFO stuff?
That is an interesting question. My best guess is that, say this is a real phenomenon and we don't know what it is, does the US military really want to come out and say, there's stuff in our skies and we don't know what it is and we don't know what to do about it? They probably don't want to admit that. That's my best theory, is that they don't want to say we can't control our own airspace. There's also this thought that if this is a real phenomenon and there are aliens in our skies, they could easily answer this question too. They could make themselves known. It's hard to know for sure what the motivations are, but that's the best I can come up with.
Do you feel like a full disclosure is even possible or likely? I think it was Brazil that had that little alien guy, and we're like, here, yep, we have an alien. And everyone was like, whoa, what? And they're doing all these CAT scans on it, and everyone was throwing in their 2 cents. Their government came out and was like, yeah, we have an alien. But there was so much skepticism. Oh my gosh. People didn't believe it.
Right, yeah.
Even though that they were saying that it was real. So I guess, what do you think of that?
It's kind of what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, even if irrefutable proof is presented, there's still going to be people that are like, no, that's fake, for one reason or another. For people that I interviewed for this book, some of them have said to me, it doesn't even matter if the government says this is true. I already know. Like, I've already had my disclosure.
Yeah.
So there's sort of two sides of it. What would it mean if the government, any government, came out and said, here's everything. This is everything we know. Just the nature of the world, there's still going to be people that doubt that it's true. And maybe that's why we're seeing this trickle of whistleblowers and little pieces, a little bit at a time, to sort of acclimate us to whatever it is.
Again, we had talked about it earlier, where it's like, even with all the like the hearings and everything that's going on with, we have whistleblowers coming out, it almost feels like people don't care. And, you know, you look at the 40s and 50s and even the 60s, like when this was first, like maybe not first coming out, but like everyone was like super interested in this. Like everyone was listening to everybody. Everyone in the public was really interested in this. But you look at it now and you show someone a video, or you look at a video and you're like, yep, it could be real, whatever. And then you just scroll on. But I find myself doing that sometimes too, where it's like object in the sky. And I'm like, yep, probably, okay, whatever. And I'll just like scroll past it. And it's like, it's so weird how 50, 60 years, like the public's view and how they feel about these topics, I feel like has completely changed to where it doesn't even matter. They don't care.
Yeah. You hear that line of, do I still have to go to work tomorrow? Yeah, well then who cares, you know? Yeah,
yeah, right.
I can understand that. Like there's a lot going on in the world and you got to prioritize your time and attention. And if the aliens come down and say, hey, free energy for everybody, that will be a big deal.
Yeah.
But if it's just sort of like this secretive, like, or minimal contact or whatever, how does that change my life? I don't know. I mean, it's fascinating to a certain segment of the population, but a lot of people are just going to be like, I got to go do capitalism or whatever. So.
There was I wish I could remember. It was one of those like Ancient Alien episodes or something where we have things that are listening into space for anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
This scientist or this guy that was listening or like, you know, looking at the data, we got something from space. And he measured it and everything like that. And in his notes, he put, wow.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could remember who it was and what this is like referencing. But it's so weird that like we have this legit equipment listening for any intelligent life, for any life out there. We got something. We got like a little chunk of it, or like a little piece of it. And, you know, you tell people this and they're like, okay, someone heard something.
Yeah.
And it's like, it blows my mind sometimes that I feel like we are so close, or we are closer than we ever have been to figuring out what's out there. And we have all of this evidence, videos, pictures, and people are just kind of, whatever. I guess if it is, it is. It's just weird how attitudes change.
Well, and there's one interesting thing that I've noticed in talking to people is when you talk to people that have had these crazy experiences and you just are like, I believe you, I'm going to listen to your whole story. It's a different vibe than if they tell their neighbor and their neighbor's like, oh, this guy's a weirdo, you know?
Yeah.
So there is sort of this fine line of like, there's a certain amount you can say where the person's like, oh, wow, that's really fascinating. And then you cross over a line into, I don't know about this person, depending on, you know, their viewpoint or whatever.
Yeah.
And, I do see that a lot where people, if the conversation makes them uncomfortable because it's too out there, they start looking for an exit ramp, change the subject or dismiss it or something. They're like, I don't like how this makes me feel and I'm going to run away.
I feel like that's sometimes why people don't talk about this stuff. There's a lot more people that have experiences and, you know, see things. And this could be across the board too, whether it be paranormal, UFO, cryptids, whatever it may be. They themselves cannot believe what they saw. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to get labeled as the crazy person, so they just kind of keep it inside and they don't tell anybody until years and years later. And then it's like, well, why didn't you say this before? And it's like, I didn't want to be labeled as the crazy person.
Right.
So
yeah, there's a weird stigma around these topics, and they vary by topic. So if you're talking about paranormal stuff, there's sometimes a religious stigma where people are like, that's demonic, or should be talking to the dead or whatever. And with UFOs, it's more from a science stigma where it's like, that's not real. There's no evidence. You know, only crazy people talk about this. But if you talk about, I don't know, a near-death experience, people are more open to that, at least in Western culture.
Yeah.
You know, if you go over to Japan or India or China or somewhere, reincarnation is a given in some cultures, or past life memories, or the near-death experiences or things like that. So there's definitely a variation in cultural acceptance on different topics. But it's starting to break down, it feels like, at least in the last 5 to 10 years. It feels like people are much more willing to share their stories and be a little more open-minded about it.
Well, what's crazy too is talking about people like accepting things and all that, is that I feel like when Hollywood makes a movie or like puts their like brand on something, so i.e., okay, so Steven Spielberg is coming out with a movie called Disclosure, and like everyone is talking about it. It's so weird that like when Hollywood or someone of cultural importance, whether it be like an influencer, actor, actress, whatever, as soon as they start saying like, oh no, hey, like this is, you should look into this and whatever, then like I feel like the whole aspect of it kind of changes too.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no, because then I feel like if they go too diehard on a subject, then they get labeled as the crazy like actor or actress, and then they get blacklisted and they never get a job again.
Yeah, and you do run into a problem where there's this theory that certain people in Hollywood, maybe Spielberg, maybe the X-Files people, some insider knowledge, and they were sort of what you might call soft disclosure. Like they're sort of leaking this out to acclimate people to these ideas. But then what can happen then is that, oh, well, you just watched too many X-Files episodes, or, you know. Yeah, humans are funny because we get stuck in what we believe and it's hard to shift.
Yeah, it really is. But kind of getting back on to like some of the questions that I had for you. So this kind of goes for UFOs, near-death experiences, like anything in your book. After writing it, where do you personally stand on the existence of like extraterrestrial life, life after this? You had kind of mentioned a little bit your belief system before the show and everything. So I guess what is your stance? What are your thoughts on this after writing this book and talking with so many people?
I would say I have more questions than I did when I started. I don't know. I'm more open-minded about the possibilities, like just listening to so many people and hearing the sincerity in their voice and seeing the emotions come through and everything. Something is going on. What it is, or if it all ties together somehow, I don't know. I'm not sure if after thousands of years of human history and everybody's been asking these big existential questions, if all these smart people that have come before me haven't figured it out. I don't think I'm the one that's going to solve this mystery, but it is a really interesting mystery, and I keep wanting to poke at it a little bit and see what I can come away with. But like I said, so far it's just led to more questions.
I think that's one of the hardest things, especially like even podcasting about like all these weird things. I started the whole podcast because I liked talking about these things. I had an interest in it, and it'd be fun to talk to other people. But kind of like exactly like what you're saying, I think I've developed so many more questions over the years. And I feel like it's one of these things where it's like, you know what? I'm never going to get the answers that I'm actually looking for. It's going to be one of these things where it's like, it's going to be a never ending revolving door. And as soon as I think I figure something out, something else comes along, or I have like another like head scratcher. Perfect example of this is my wife and I will have religious talks every couple of days. I'm not trying to put her on the spot with stuff. It's just one of those things where once you start asking those questions to like people that are like die hard about certain subjects and everything like that, not to say that they start to wonder too, but then it's like, okay, now I can start to see like them starting to formulate questions too. I feel like no one really has a straight answer on anything about like whatever it may be. Take Bigfoot. Bigfoot's been around for years and years and years. We have the Patterson-Gimlin film, and then like from there it took off. It's like no one has a straight answer on like what Bigfoot could be. Is it a primate? Is it an extraterrestrial being? Is it a half human, half ape hybrid? Is it like a missing link? No one knows. And after all of these years, and even like the oceans, we've been in the ocean for years and years and years. We've come up with more mysteries about the ocean. And then again, like the whole space talk where it's, you look at space and we keep finding things. And that it's so crazy to think that you're looking for answers, but you may never get it. I think the biggest thing is just to be happy. At the end of the day, try to be happy.
Right. And, you know, these mysteries, maybe there's one of the questions that comes up, especially with, say, the UFO and alien topic, but maybe with the cryptid topic as well, maybe with all of it. Let's say that there is some higher advanced intelligence out there that we're trying to study. If they're more advanced than us and they do not want to be studied, they may be able to make it harder on us to get answers. And maybe that's the point, is to keep us questioning rather than settling into our beliefs that we think we've got it all figured out almost. We just need one more telescope or one more microscope to get the final answers to our questions. And really, there's so many bigger questions and so many more questions that we haven't even thought to ask yet. Maybe the universe is sort of trying to give us hints about where to look next or something. I don't know.
And I feel like as humans, we look for a finish line on things. No, I'm not saying everybody, but perfect example is I switched career fields, and I used to have a job where it was, yep, like this is what you do, and then you're done. That's it. And there's nothing really beyond that. And I switched to a new career field where I constantly have to be learning and studying. It's so weird to go from years and years and years of work to like where it's like, no, it's just X, Y, and Z. That's how it is. And you don't need to study. You don't need to look further into this. I now have to constantly be researching and studying and making sure that I'm trying to find like holes in this new area. It's so weird to think about. I feel like most humans just want, where's the end line? Like show me where, right. Like show me where I need to get to, so I have that finish line. I have that, like, something on my sights. That's the hardest thing about the UFO community, the paranormal, the mysteries. There is no end line. It's constantly evolving, and you're constantly looking for new things, and more things will come out, and a bigger telescope will come out, and it's like, oh, okay, now we can look even further because the whole James Webb satellite, we can see further than we ever have before now, and we're seeing things in clearer images. We're picking more things up, and it's crazy. So,
well, and with the James Webb in particular, we're finding things that don't fit the current model. We're finding things that we're like, okay, wait, that breaks what we thought we knew, so we got to back up a minute. And I mean, you could trace that all the way back to, does the Earth revolve around the sun or vice versa? Like at one point in history, you would have been labeled as crazy, or maybe jailed or killed or something for saying that the Earth wasn't the center of everything. So yeah, like I said, we always think we're almost there. We just got a couple more questions to answer, and then we'll have it all figured out. But I think the truth is there's a lot more going on in this weird universe than what we have figured out yet.
And I think this kind of brings up a great last question for you, for your readers specifically, and even like the audience members. Like, what do you hope readers take away from your book after the final pages and reading it?
I would say a more open mind, or a sense of humility around these things that we think we know. It's sort of what we were just talking about, where we don't have it all figured out, and I certainly don't. Just to open your mind a little bit, read these stories as though they're true, and think about what that might mean if they are. And then you can also put the other filter on and say, what if this is all made up? What does that tell us about the kind of stories that we make up for ourselves? So yeah, just a little dose of humility and a little dose of open-mindedness is hopefully what I go for. And I guess the last little bit would be to just listen.
I like that. I like that a lot. Just listen. I feel like we're in a point in time right now where everyone is kind of at each other's throats, and everyone's not willing to just kind of sit back and listen to another person's experiences and stories and what they have to share. So, Edson, I really do appreciate you coming onto the show and talking to me and talking about your book. I know we didn't get to talk about everything, but again, I didn't want to ruin it for your readers, or I didn't want, our audience members to not have something to look forward to in your book, because you have more than just UFOs and near-death experiences. You said that you had some other mysteries put in there. So as far as our audience members and your readers, go ahead and take a look at that. Edson, again, if you don't mind, if you can provide the link or where people can find your book, we'll add it in the description of the show.
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon, or I've got a website set up, or on any of the other online retailers. You'll find it. Strange Light is the name of it.
Awesome. And then before we officially sign off, do you have anything that you want to say to the audience members? Anything you want to plug in there before we sign off?
The only thing I would add is if you do have any stories that you'd like to share with me, you can reach me through various social media or my website, strangelightbook.com. And I've got a second book in the works, and I've got an audio book of the first one that I've got a narrator working on for me. So there'll be more coming on these topics, but yeah, that's where I am at this point.
Ah, perfect. Cool. And again, we will, audience members, we're going to leave all those links in the description so you can find them. Just hyperlink that. And then just remember that also that we have here. We don't want stuff that's normal. We want stuff that's effing weird.